Greetings, fellow deep thinkers, and thank you for tapping in with another segment with me, Doctress Moe. I am excited for today's topic, as this is a topic that it runs very dear to me on the internal, just basically from personal experience as well as within professional experience. And this is a topic that relates heavily to my dissertation that I completed in order for me to become a doctor and a part of that process. So I've done a lot of studying and research into trauma, which came about due to my own personal experiences with trauma, and it made me want to learn more about it. And so in today's conversation, we're going to be getting into the relationship of trauma on the brain. And we're going to be breaking it down to see just exactly how it can affect us. And to understand, many don't realize that trauma can have both a positive and a negative effect on us in the long term. And so we are going to be getting into that into today's conversation. So definitely make sure that you grab your tea, your coffee, your water, whatever it is that you are drinking on as you are watching this or listening to this segment today. And it's my hopes that you leave here feeling enlightened, but then also feeling heard, feeling seen, feeling understood, and feeling motivated and excited to move forward with this information, to be able to implement it within your personal life, whether you are someone who you feel like you have trauma that you're still working through, or if you consider yourself as a healer and you work with other people who also have trauma, and so you work with them on working through their trauma. This session should be helpful when it comes to, teaching and showing you how can you utilize that for healing, as well as identifying superpowers through those experiences. So I hope you all are ready for today's conversation, because we are about to jump right on in. Okay. So according to research, roughly 3 out of 5 individuals will experience trauma by the age of 18. Now, within the United States, it's a roughly around like 70%ish, so it's a little bit over 3 out of 5. But it's when we're looking at from the global atmosphere, and then when we're looking at from the local atmosphere, it's expected that roughly around 70% of individuals will have at least one traumatic experience within their lifetime. And when you look at that, that's a lot. So roughly 7 out of 10 individuals, and that number has increased since we've had different global health issues and natural disasters and things of that nature that have happened, that have increased those different traumatic experiences, as well as the tracking of how they have been tracking the stats have changed. Because historically, when looking at trauma, before I even get into that, let's look into the definition of trauma by definition in the book, okay? So trauma is defined as a reaction to an event that causes some type of discomfort, negative feedback, or negative reactions within your life. So it has to have some type of an effect on you. So what does this mean? It means that 2 people can experience the same situation, and one person can see it as being a traumatic situation, and the other can see it as just being something that happened to them in their lifetime. So trauma is actually something that is individualized. It's something where an individual has to connect to that incident and what happened in that experience, and they have to basically program it inside of themselves as identifying it as being a negative event that happened in their life they had a negative reaction to. Over the years, there has been an increased interest in the study of trauma studies. And the reason for this is because there's been a greater acknowledgement of identifying that different situations and different experiences within life can change the outcome of something else. It can change the trajectory of a person's life. It can change the decisions that they make. And that came through the study of trauma through different disciplines. So the study of trauma through cognitive psychology, the study of trauma through education, the study of trauma through nursing, the medical field. Through the increase of this study in all the different disciplines, both professionally and just in regular life and everyday life, as we discuss it, whether if it's in therapy or amongst our friends and other relationships, this interest has become very much so increased. And the reason for this is because we're realizing that there's a lot going on with mental health, and trauma has a lot to do with that. And so the study of trauma and the effects of trauma on the adult in the long term, the studies basically started around the early 1990s with the Ases Research Study. So this was a study that was completed in conjunction with the CDC and the Kaiser Permanente Foundation. Now, the Ases study, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, it was conducted with over 17,000 HMO members. And basically what they did was they asked a series of questions, of 10 questions, to see if they had any of these adverse childhood experiences before the age of 18. And what they did from that, they took that data and they compared it to the different health issues that the individuals were going through within their life. And they identified that with the increase of trauma that an individual went through before the age of 18, there was an increase of different medical problems and mental health problems that was identified through this, and it utilized for them to have to use their insurance more. So a big reason as to also why trauma-informed care has come about more and there has been more interest in the field of trauma is because they're realizing that it's becoming expensive to not manage it. It's becoming expensive to not pay attention to it. And if we don't pay attention to it, we're going to see an even more, a larger uptick within issues and problems within our society when it comes to mental health and the management of it. And so with this, we also have seen that over time there has been an advancement when it comes to the different indicators that are used to identify the level of trauma that someone has experienced within their life or before the age of 18. So I am going to go over the indicators of the 10 from the original scale. Now, there are other questions that have been added in on top of these questions to relate to newer developments when it comes to trauma. So the trauma of racism, the trauma of different community violence and things of that nature, adding in how those can also be traumatic, whether you have had firsthand experience with it or not, and also by adding in other demographics of individuals who may go through experiences that others may not. Because we do also want to point out that the majority of the individuals who were in the ACEs research in the original, they were predominantly people of no color. So that is something that you do want to note and add in. And that's why there have been other organizations who have been adding to the original scale. Okay, so what I would like for you to do is to do a self-assessment with this scale. So I'm going to read off the 10 different indicators, and I just want you to identify within yourself if it's a yes or no for yourself to be able to score yourself. And then we're going to go deeper into this conversation. So the first item, did you feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, or had no one to protect or take care of you before the age of 18? The second one, did you lose a parent through divorce, abandonment, death, or any other reason before the age of 18? Remember, all of these questions are in response to before the age of 18. Did you live with anyone who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? I'm going to block that word out because I don't know how they're going to, manage that. Did you live with anyone who had a problem with drinking or using drugs, including prescription drugs? Did your parents or adults in your home ever hit, punch, beat, or threaten to harm each other? Did you live with anyone who went to jail or prison? Did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Did a parent or adult in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? Did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special? And then lastly, did you experience unwanted physical contact, such as fondling or oral, anal, vaginal, intercourse, or penetration? Okay. So I want you to just score yourself to see where you are on those 10 indicators, okay, of it. Now, one thing that what got me really interested in this was when I first became aware of the ACEs back in undergrad. Oh gosh, some time ago, well over 15 years ago. Well, about 15 years ago. Well, probably a little more than that, actually. Anyway, longer than that. Actually, now that I think about it, oh gosh, it's been almost 20 years. But anyway, so as I was researching this and I took the scale the first time and I was like, wow, I'm a 10 out of 10. And this is when I was working on my undergrad degree in social work. And that got me really interested in wanting to learn more, because I'm just like, wait, hold on. If they're saying that the chances of the more ACEs that you have, there's a higher chance that life is going to be, you're going to have a lot of issues, difficulties, health problems, things of that nature. And I was like, I beat the odds. So I want to go deeper into this to see what is really going on, because I was a 10 out of 10. Okay. And so that took me down the wormhole of being interested in trauma, and it kept me in the field of social work, which then moved me into the field of education. And I've always worked in high trauma communities who have gone through a lot of trauma, in which it's been a lot of trauma even within the schools of working and seeing, students being lost to community violence and things of that nature every school year. It became a norm. And so when we think about all of this, it has something to do, it affects the brain. And the reason for it, when we look at the aspect of it affecting the brain, okay, we have to realize there is no illness or sickness that can go through our body without the brain co-signing it and giving the okay for it to happen, okay? And so what is it about trauma that causes the breakdown of the body in the first place? That's what we're about to get into now. Now, when looking at trauma from more of a social perspective, it makes a lot of sense how going through a traumatic experience can then affect your future behavior, okay? So for example, the trauma that I had gone through, it made me want to go to college. It made me want to do better. It made me want to not become a statistic that I had saw so much around me, within my community, within my family, okay? I wanted to break different generational curses, and that was the way that I saw it within myself, of being able to break generational curses within my family. And so what was it about the different experiences that I went through that motivated me? What would make an experience that I could go through that's very similar, that could motivate me, and someone else, it could cause them to go backwards? How a similar situation can cause a difference in response, okay? And so with my dissertation, that was actually the topic. And so what I did was I conducted research with 5 special education teachers who had went through childhood trauma. And basically through that, I wanted to learn in what ways did their trauma influence their career decisions and their experiences teaching within an inner city school. And I learned a lot from that, and learning how trauma can also be used as a superpower. But there's different things that have to be utilized and put into place for that to happen. You have to have the right tools there available for you in order to see it and perceive it and have that critical thinking, or that deductive or inductive ability to make something out of those difficult moments. And that was something that I noticed was a difference within resiliency, as well as different available resources to help with that process. So a book that I would like to really recommend is actually The Body Keeps the Score. This is one of the books that I utilized for my dissertation research, and I absolutely loved it, because in this book, y'all, my kitten is like, wants attention as soon as I started recording. So I'm over here trying to entertain him while communicating at the same time. He adopted me, okay? Long story short, I had a kitten adopt me recently. And I can't get him away from me. So I'm going to take this as a quick tea break anyway. So feel free to go and get you some tea as well, okay? So in the book, The Body Keeps the Score, Vanderkolk looks into how the aspect of trauma, the body remembers the responses. The body remembers how it feels. The body remembers to the point where it can freeze up at a response. So in the book, it goes into how the body always the body keeps the score. The body remembers your experiences. It remembers everything it went through. It remembers it has a certain response to certain situations. So when you come across other situations that may feel very similar to that, your body will remember before anything else, and it will react similarly to a similar situation. And that in a way can kind of show you your relationship with what happened in that previous experience, and how you now view that experience, now as you look, forward basically. And so it went into the cognitive psychology aspect of when it comes to healing and working through your trauma as well, and why many people in therapy do not get better. Because within therapy is not just a sense of going to therapy and talking about what happened, but it's the actual process of identifying how do you relate to that incident? How do you relate to the response? What triggers this response? So basically, our responses to trauma in a lot of ways are very cognitive. It has a lot to do with the brain. It has a lot to do with the memories of what we have stored on the inside and how we bring those back up. So as you've seen in my previous videos, I do a lot of talking of the prefrontal cortex, okay? Because the prefrontal cortex is very important. The prefrontal cortex is basically like the space in our subconscious or in our brain, okay, where it collects all of the information. And not only does it collect all of the information, so in this case, your prefrontal cortex is responsible for creating the action plan. It's responsible for delegating the rules. It's responsible for delegating what gets done, okay? But how does it identify what gets done? And that's because of, it's like when you think of a library, the prefrontal cortex is like the librarian who keeps everything structured and organized, everything together, how it needs to be. And then the subconscious is all of the books. It's all of the information. It's the process. You know what I'm saying? And so that is like the relationship. So the prefrontal cortex, basically what it does whenever a situation happens, it goes to that library, the subconscious energy, the subconscious information to identify how to react to this situation. So if there is still an outdated book in that space, that outdated book is what's going to be checked out. And so it's very important when it comes to looking at trauma and how our trauma is affecting us. And this is a lot of reason why I got into hypnotherapy and doing hypnotherapy and past life regressions. Once I got deeper into understanding just the power of the brain and what it really takes is just that reforming, that reprogramming, to put yourself on a different timeline, onto a different frequency of energy, not on a frequency of energy of continuously, resonating with and attracting and connecting to the interactions that related to your trauma self versus that self that is in complete healed space, that is in flow. So when we experience trauma, it's like we're putting extra work on our prefrontal cortex. It's like we're telling the librarian, oh, we need you to carry 100 books at one time. What's going to happen? That librarian is not going to be able to do her job efficiently. She's not going to be able to be completely successful with her job. She's going to be slowed down. It's going to take her longer to walk from this space to this space. It's going to take her, it's going to break down her bones. Eventually, she goes home and she's even more tired as the days go by, to eventually she starts hating her job. That is exactly what trauma does within our life and our experiences. So the more experiences that we go through and that we code and identify on the inside as an incident that hurt us, as the incident that bothered us, that changed our outcome, it's like we're adding another book to the librarian's pile that the librarian has to carry from one place to the other while also giving orders at the same time. And so this is why it relates to how trauma symptoms what it can relate to. Trauma symptoms can include memory loss, compromised stress responses. You also can have unregulated emotional responses or a difficulty when it comes to co-regulating your emotions and your experiences with others when you encounter. And so that's where we can be continuously triggered by others that we encounter and come into, interaction with, when those things are not addressed or really looked at. And so the responses of that trauma is coming out in that manner. And so that can happen to the point where it's kind of like the prefrontal cortex just totally shuts down. And it's just like, you know what? We're overworked. There's not enough, workers here. We're going on strike. And that's when we shut down, when we're not able to really to have responses, when our bodies freeze up. That's kind of like what's going on inside of ourselves because it's so overworked. It's so much going on. It's so much there inside of that cart. There's so many tabs open to the point where it has to be taken away little bit by little bit. It has to be addressed a little bit by little bit within that subconscious, and that's in the books. And so there has to be a replacement of energy and memories and understanding of the experience. So just talking about what you've gone through and what has affected you and what it did, that's not really healing. All it is just continuously ripping off that scab and reminding yourself of the incident. It's reminding you of what happened, how it affected you, and why it's affected you to be where you're at right now. When in reality, you have to literally redefine how you look at that situation to reprogram your body's response to it, your mind's response to it, your interactions and your responses with other people, you know, in response to whatever. I feel like that just totally confused how that came out, okay? Long story short, you have to re-identify how you look at that. You can no longer say that that situation is hurting me, that situation hurt me. There has to be a point where you come to where that situation helped me get better. That situation helped me become a stronger teacher. That situation taught me empathy. It's like you have to redefine what those situations did to you. So then now your brain reprograms that information and it no longer sees it as this is a trauma response. We're going to get sad. We're going to be hurt. We're going to run. We're going to freeze up. Because we've reprogrammed the memory and the understanding of that here. So if we were to look at it from, for example, the memory loss that can be a symptom of trauma, okay? It's kind of like the librarian is losing the books. It's losing the order of it. It doesn't know the order. Nothing is in order. Everything is just everywhere. It's messy, right? And so that's what happens up here. We're not able to remember anything because the trauma affected our ability to organize things in this manner, in this area, in this subject area. Let me know down below if that makes sense. So when it comes to just navigating this, because this is a lot of information, because within society, they want us to view it as if it's negative. So the more we keep hearing about it without a healing piece of it to combat it, we're continuously replaying it in our mind, in our brain, of it being something that's affecting us. So we have to do something different. And one of the main pieces is in understanding that our experiences of trauma does not have to steer us down a difficult path. It does not have to have a negative effect on us. Only if we decide to allow it to. Now, there is the piece in there that the more things that you go through, the more things that you experience, it's like it's piling up more on there, and it can become more difficult to unpack. And that's why it's important to be with someone who is trained, that is helped with training. That's why it's helpful to be with someone who is trained in truly unpacking trauma and re-identifying the trauma, reallocating the trauma. So identifying how does that person relate to that trauma that they went through? How can we reword this trauma? How can we re-identify this trauma? How can we redefine what this trauma did to the individual? Because then through that, your brain and your subconscious is going to be able to regulate this situation as, you know what? This worked to benefit me. It's not hurting me. It's not harming me. It helped create a superpower. So for example, with my dissertation, realizing that all of the teachers that I interviewed, how they felt that their experiences that they went through, their traumatic experiences from a childhood, how it actually, they felt like it made them into more like empathetic. It made them more understanding. It made them feel like they had a purpose. They wanted to give back to help other children who may go through similar things that they went through. But it is important to note with that they also had to create different habits to help them with that. They all had gone through different therapies, anger management. They had different co-regulation skills that they utilize on the day-to-day to help them when it came to co-regulating their emotions with their students' emotions. They had different activities and things that they utilize within their classroom to help as an intervention in the classroom. And the thing with these interventions, they were interventions that they could use as well as the students. So for example, music therapy. And with that music therapy, what they would do is they play the music in the classroom. That music is helping them, but it's also helping their children and their students in the classroom as well as they're working on their work. Because a lot of times in these settings, the children that they were working with, they also had gone through different traumatic experiences. So they had to co-regulate their triggers, what they were going through as the adult in the room, as well as working with the student and helping teach the student how to regulate theirs as well. So how do you identify yours? And when you're working with others, if you're someone who work with other individuals as well, help them identify how they work through theirs, how they identify theirs. So I have a question. In what ways have you utilized your experience, potentially traumatic experiences, for your benefit? Feel free to let us know in the comments. It may be a benefit or a help to others who are watching this video, who finds it today, tomorrow, or deeper into the future. But then also, if you're someone who's currently looking at this and, working on it, and what areas do you see yourself wanting to pay more attention to shift that perspective? Feel free to let me know down below in the comments, because that can also help me with future video topics of knowing what are some of the things that you all are interested in, or what it is that you're working through, because then I can tailor the conversation surrounding that. Because I do want this to also be from an educational atmosphere, but then also a healing atmosphere, a balancing atmosphere where you're able to come in, take what is needed, internalize it, reflect on it, and implement it within your own personal life where you see needed. And always remember, just because if someone goes through an experience that is similar to you or one that you would identify as being traumatic, it doesn't mean that they coded that situation as being traumatic. And just because they don't code it as being traumatic for them, it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with them. It just means that that's how they've coded it and they've identified it. Now, that situation still has shifted them in some form of way, whether it shifted them to want to go out and be, a great person, or it shifted them to, want to be a closed off, whatever it is, that experience still affected them and shifted them in some way. But if they don't identify it as being something that shifted them or affected them negatively, then there's not much that we can really say or combat against that. And so when we identify how we are affected, and we also, when we look at other individuals, that we don't just assume that a situation had a negative effect on them, it helps us better code and decide on ours as well. Because there are a few areas that have a big effect on how we code the trauma that happens anyway. And it depends on our prior programming of what we went through, our perceptions, our sensory memory, as well as our pain triggers. So it all depends on, it's like basically everything that we have gone through in life, everything we have experienced, it has helped with the development of our superego. It has helped with the development of all three parts of our subconscious. And because of all of those experiences, it's like each experience added its own little flair onto something. Each experience added its own glare onto something, okay? To the point where it's like building blocks added one thing on top of each other, one thing on top of each other. And they all had a different effect. Just because an individual had a similar situation happen to them as you, doesn't mean that it affected them the same way. It doesn't mean that they're having a negative effect. And so it's important for us to not assume what someone's situation did to them or how it affected them, because that can be an unfair misconception that we make. And so because of this compilation of all of your experiences coming together, we all have different levels of what we have to work through when it comes to coding inside of our coding bag, I guess you could say. And so have grace for others who are working through theirs, because you never know what are all the other pieces that are added on top of that. Because then we also have to add in, how were they raised? How were they spoken to as a child? Because the other aspects that they have in their life can help combat those negative moments, right? So some could say, what helped me was me having my guidance counselor that took me in, basically, that allowed me to be at her house all the time. She served as a mentor so much that we stayed in contact and she served on my dissertation committee. She's been my mentor since my freshman year of high school, 2000, you know? And so with seeing that and understanding that, it's like there's different butterfly effects that happen in our life. And those different butterfly effects, it's like when they happen, they kind of take a little piece off of your load. You get what I'm saying? It's like, and if you don't know what a butterfly effect is said to be a phenomenon where a single event can have a long-term effect on other events that seem to be unrelated. Okay, so it's basically saying how a butterfly flapping its wing have so much power that it can shift atmosphere energy around and other things, in which it really can. Because think about it, if the wing is pushing enough air, it can make a leaf fall on the ground. And that shows how we are all interconnected in some form of way. So the people that we come in contact with over the course of our lifetime all have an ability to be a butterfly effect in our life. They have the ability to add to the health of our subconscious and our development, or they have the ability to take from. So some people have been in spaces where they had more taken from them than they had someone feed into them. And so that's why I want to make sure that I am always that space where you get something fed into you as well, especially if that's not something that you are used to receiving in other spaces, or if that's not something that you weren't used to receiving in your childhood and in your development. And so that even shows within the research with the Ases study, where the more traumatic experiences that the individuals had gone through, the more they found themselves having with issues and problems within their body and their health. And so that shows how there is a relationship too, as you have more things that happen, how it can cause you to break down versus being built up. And so that's why it's important to have a balance of information there, or a balance of support there for you to combat those other moments that tear you down. But also, when we become aware of it, that's the beautiful thing of our brain and our subconscious and our experiences. We can always create new experiences. We can always reprogram our brain. We can always turn it around for our good. How many times have we seen people who were once addicted to drugs or something of the sort, and they turn their life around and they become motivational speakers? They go out and write books. They go out and help other people get off drugs. They go out and do all of these spectacular things. And that is because what they did was they took control over their experiences, what they did, and they identified, wait, hold on. This experience of what I went through doesn't make me look weak. It doesn't make me look bad. It doesn't make me look like a horrible person. It was an experience that I had, that I got through, that I overcame, that I am a victor over, and I can help other individuals become the same thing. My story can motivate others who are going through something of the similar, or something that is not even related to what I went through, and they're still motivated by it. The only difference between that is a shift in perception. Any of us can do it. Any of us can do it. And so that's why it's very important for us to pay close attention to what we allow into our subconscious, what we allow into our brain. What do we listen to? What do we internalize? It's okay to talk about and hear the different things that we go through in life, right? The different things that may have happened to us, but you don't want to just leave the scab open. You need to have some aloe vera put on it. And the aloe vera is not just, yeah, and their karma is going to be this, and they're horrible, and they did this. That's not healing. That's not shifting anything in your subconscious, because it's still saying that they have some form of power over us. So what we have to literally do is go in and reprogram that entire thing. It's okay to talk about what happened, but let's put this aloe vera on there. Let's see how this situation made you into a better person. Let's see how this situation didn't really affect you as deep as your subconscious once felt. Because a lot of times you got to think about it. If we're talking about trauma that have happened in your childhood, oftentimes as a child, things appear to be bigger than what it really is. We can sometimes be, things can sometimes appear to be bigger than what it really is. You know, we can be upset and mad because a parent yelled at us. But when we get older, we realize they were angry and they yelled at us so much because they were working a job that they were stressful at, because they weren't living in their complete truth on what they wanted to be doing. So then that in turn came back on you. That's how you shift perception of the trauma. When we understand that we are interconnected with the individuals that we come in contact with. And that's a whole nother conversation on like how our brains and our energy connects and attracts different people who relate to different contexts of ourselves. So as we begin to wrap up this session tonight, I just want to remind you that when it comes to trauma and its effects on its brain, it depends on how it's coded, and know that it can always be recoded. And know that its effect on the brain can weigh it down. You know, it can make it go really, really heavy to where it can affect other areas of our life. And so that's why it's important for us to have other things there and other resources. But it's also understood in knowing that some people like living in the trauma or in the victim space, and know that it's okay for them to do that as well. But you have the power and the choice on if you want to accept that within your personal life or not. And with that being said, I'm interested in hearing you all's feedback down below on this topic. I thank you all for tuning in and tapping in with me and my frequency as we have this deep talk. Well, I'm recording it at nighttime, but I don't know when you're watching it. Let me know when you all would like for me to release these. Do you like them being released in the morning time or in the evening time more? What was I about to say? So as we leave here in this space today, I want you to reflect on how you've coded what you've gone through. Or I want you to look at, if you work with clients on their different life situations that they've gone through, I want you to work with them on identifying how they've coded their trauma, how it's been looked at, how it's been identified, and how can that be combated in a way where it's seen in the affirmative and not in a manner that is holding back versus building upon. And so I'm thankful for you all being here on today. And we are now going to turn off this faucet and disconnect. And I will see you all in our next segment. Have an amazing rest of your day, and make sure you check out the videos that show up on your screen for other videos of these deep talks that you just may find yourself interested in on today. Thank you for being here. Make sure to subscribe and share. Have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.